What is up, my art and design friends? I'm Andy Story, your neighborhood art director that designs movie posters for a living. Today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how I use Threshold, how I use it to create a smart object so that we can manipulate that smart object and use the displacement map as well as a ripple technique for the edges. And these same exact things can be applied to typography. So this is a 2-in-1 tutorial where we work on an image as well as the typography so that you're able to create an awesome graphic, grungy, textured out design. So without further ado, let's dive on in.
What?
All right, y'all, let's get that Photoshop fired on up and the tutorial rocking and rolling. I want to discuss what we're going to need for this piece of artwork and or graphic design and or typography for our Threshold ink bleed technique. You're going to want to need a photograph of somebody in a profile. I picked this photograph from Envato.com, which happens to be a great resource to pick up licensed photography and other assets that you can use on your graphic design project professionally. So you don't want to get in trouble in the future and get sued for using images that are not licensed for you to use. Now, the cool thing is that Envato comes with an unlimited download capability as well as a yearly subscription for, I want to say, around $200. So you really can't go wrong. And if you are working as a professional, you may be able to write that off on your taxes, but talk to your tax guy. I'm definitely not a tax guy. All right. The other thing we're going to need is some textures. These textures are from texturelabs.org, which provides free texture resources as well as an awesome YouTube channel for tutorials. So I highly recommend checking out that YouTube channel as well. So big shout out to Brady. The textures I did pick up are kind of like this grungy, concretey, paper. And then the other one is this paper where it's a folded piece of paper. And I think it's going to work really, really well for our displacement part of the tutorial. Now, once you have this kind of a texture ready, go ahead and hit Command T, and we're going to start creating our background. I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key and just drag this to fill my artboard like so, and then hit Enter. And now we're going to be able to create a displacement, but to do that we need to add a little bit of curves. Actually, first let's go ahead and create a new file so that we can save this displacement on a displacement or in a displacement folder, and you'll see what this all means shortly, so don't get too confused. So go up to Image, Duplicate, and then we're just going to call it Displacement. Hit OK, and now we're ready to add some contrast. So the easy way to do that is I usually just go to Curves, Adjustment Layer, and then crank up the darks and brights like so that you're almost creating a Z on the curve tool, something like that. Now we're going to go to File, Save As, and then if you have a displacements map folder on your desktop or wherever, go ahead and save it in that folder, and we're going to get to that shortly on how to use this. And now I'm just going to close out, get rid of this, and go back to our main artboard. And from here, we're just going to go up to our image and mask her out. And the easy way to do that, because we don't need an exact mask, is by going up to Select, Subject, and let the AI do its thing and mask this out for us. Now that it's masked out and you see the dancing ants, go ahead and hit the circle inside of a rectangle key over here to add our layer mask, and bam, we have a masked out image. The only thing I really want to do is just get rid of this part here, which the AI didn't pick up. So I'm just going to get my lasso tool and do this very quickly. And then I'm going to make sure that my background layer is set to black by pushing X on my keyboard and then hitting Command Delete to get rid of that and mask that out. And then I'm going to hit Command D one more time to get rid of the selection. We're going to be using the threshold quite a bit in this tutorial, but to prepare this image, I want to add a little bit more contrast to our image. So I'm going once again to our curves adjustment layer, and I'm just going to attach it by hitting Alt or Option, Command, and G, and that's going to create a clipping mask so that it only affects that layer. And then I'm going to go over to my curves and just put a nice little S curve in there to increase the contrast. And now this hair is very dark, so I might want to mask that out so that we may be able to get a little bit of threshold in there. So I'm going to the mask on the curves tool, hitting X and painting with black with my brush tool to see if we can get some of that hair to come back into the situation. You know what? I'm gonna do one more curves. I'm not sure if this is gonna work, but we're just gonna crank that curve up now that we see some of that hair coming through. And I'm gonna do the same thing, Option, Command G, clip it, and then I'm gonna hit Command I on that mask, and then I'm gonna paint with white this time to let some of that brightness come through. And I'm actually gonna paint some on these braids, and then maybe a little bit down here, just so that this shows through a little better on the threshold, which you'll see very shortly. Now, let's go to another adjustment layer, our threshold. And like that, we have a really nice graphic image. But as you can see, the hair didn't really show up, and that's okay. But I kind of want this eyelid to show a little better. So back to that curves layer we created, we're just gonna paint with white to get some of that eyelid to show up a little bit better. Same thing with the lips. We might be able to get the lips to show a little better, like so. And you can basically, wherever you want to see a little bit more highlight, you can just add some light. This is how you really just refine your threshold. As you can see, it's very strong and powerful. So sometimes playing with the threshold level. Okay, I like that. So I have the threshold at 98. Now what we're gonna do is create a smart object of the threshold. But first, we just wanna hide our background so that we just have a white background. And then we're gonna create a solid color above everything like that. And then we're gonna have our solid color be black. And then we're just gonna hide it by clicking on the eyeball. And now we're actually gonna make a selection of all this black, all of the shadows and shading. So just go up to select color range, and then you can just click on the black like that, hit OK, and now click on our adjustment layer, the full black adjustment layer or solid color adjustment layer. Click on the mask, and now you can just hit Command Delete, and that's going to create a mask for us. And now hit Command D to release the selection, and that looks all cool and everything, but we need to hit Command I on our mask so that we invert it, and now all of that black is showing through on that adjustment, on that solid color adjustment layer, which is cool because now you can go ahead and hide everything below it, and we have what we created. But what we want to do is turn this into its own smart object so that we can manipulate it here in the future. So to do that, we're going to convert to smart object like so. And now we have this cool graphic that we can play around with, move, do whatever we want. All right, y'all, I totally forgot to add this in the video, but if you could do me a favor, hit that like button. If you've learned anything up until this point, it really helps the channel out. Thank you. We want to work on doing the displacement map as well as doing a little bit of edge work to make it look like it's got to bleed into the paper. So let's go to our background layer, activate that paper background, and then drag her to the left by hitting V on your keyboard. And we'll just kind of bring her over here like so. There we go. And now we're gonna go up to filter, making sure that we're still on that same layer. And then we're gonna up to filter. And then on filter, we're gonna go to distort, and then from distort to displace. And now, usually the 10 and 10, horizontal scales at 10, vertical scales at 10, stretch to fit is selected, repeat edge pixels is selected, and embed file data in smart object is selected. So once you have that, go ahead and hit OK. And then we're going to use our displacement map from our displacement folder, and then we're just going to hit open, and now it's going to do its thing. And as you can see, the edges look really good, like they're bleeding into the paper, and it's distorted so that it follows along the folded edges and looks like it's actually part of the paper for the most part. Now, the other thing we want to do is maybe add a little bit more edginess or grunginess to the edges. Even though the displacement map did a great job and added texture and grunginess to the edges, I just want to see if this is going to do a little bit more for us. So we're going to go back up to filter, distort, and then we're going to go to ripple. And then on ripple, we're just going to keep it very minimal. You want to put your image so that you can see it, and then you can see what you're actually doing. So 262% looks too crazy. So we just want to have a little bit. Let's do 16%. Hit OK. And I mean, it's very subtle, but if you zoom in, you can kind of see that it's following the grain of the paper. Now the last thing we want to do is just turn our smart object graphic of our lady to an overlay. And now we are looking really, really good. And the second thing we need to do is we need to work on our typography. So we're going to go create a new layer, and then you can put it in a group by hitting Command G and then calling it type. Now I've already done that because this is my template. Now on that new layer, hit T on your keyboard, and we're going to type out grind because this is the poster grind channel, and I just like the name grind because that's what we do on the daily as graphic designers and artists working in whatever industry we're working in. And I want to kind of have something like this. So we'll just do that for now. And then I'm just going to kern the letters so that everything's a little closer. And now in between each letter, I'm going to kern. So I'm going to hit Option on my keyboard, and then with the arrow key, just drag each letter a little closer so that it's a little bit more on the custom side. And now I'm going to hit Command T and just make this a little bigger, and then maybe drop that in between the curvature of her and the neck. And I'm going to hit New Layer, and I'm going to add the. Go ahead and do a little design work, maybe drag the, and put it right here. That looks kind of cool. And now obviously I'm going to use this piece of design work for the thumbnail of the YouTube tutorial, and I'm just leaving a little bit of space up here because I might do something. If you clicked on this, you've seen the thumbnail, so I haven't designed it yet, but I'm leaving space up here for a particular purpose. Now what I want to do is just add a duplicate layer of the typography, and then I'm going to hit Command G and just call this OG type to stay organized in case I have to go back to that, because I'm going to be turning our type into a smart object, as you're going to see, and I'm just going to pull that down below those two pieces of typography and then hide it. And now on these, I'm just going to go ahead and convert to smart object by right clicking and then convert to smart object. And then the same thing for grind, right click, convert to smart object. And now we're set up to do the same exact thing that we did to our image by doing a little bit of a displacement map. So on the grind layer, I'm going to go up to filter, and then I'm going to go to distort and displace, hit OK. And I'm going to use that same displacement map. And now, as you can see, the edges look great. And I'm going to do the same exact thing to the, but all I got to do is drag this smart filter by holding Option or Alt and dragging that up to the, and that's going to do the same exact thing to the. Now, one other thing I want to do to grind is I want to have this kind of either bleed out or just fade a little bit. And an easy and fun way to do that is by going up to Filter, Blur, or Blur Gallery, and then we're just going to go to Field Blur. And then we're just going to drop tack over here on the end of grind, and then we can just kind of play around with the strength of it, the strength of the blur, just have that blur out a little. And then we're going to drop one more right over here and make this so that it's not blurred. That's going to prevent it from sneaking into the rest of our typography. And now it just depends on the subjectivity and what you're trying to accomplish. But I kind of like having a little bit of blur and a little bit of nuance in pretty much everything I do. And you can use this technique on other typography situations. So we'll do that and we'll see what it looks like and hit OK. Cool. Now, the other thing I wanted to do is go ahead and change the blending mode. So I'm clicking on both of those layers and I'm going to drop that to overlay. And now you can really see that blur just kind of faded out a little bit, just gives a little bit of something to the design. And the other thing we can do is use a little bit of blend if. So I'm going to double click on grind, bring up our blend if tool, and then I'm going to drag, holding down the Option key, I'm going to drag this slider to the left and see if that does a little something for us. And I'm going to drag the other one. I'm just going to kind of blend into, it's just going to blend our type into that piece of paper. Looking good. And I'm going to do the same thing to her. So I'm going to double click, drag, holding down the Option key. Let's make sure we can see her. And you can kind of see how it fades it into the texture like that. And then one other thing I want to do is add a little bit of color, a little bit of flare. So I'm going to create a new layer above our image, and then I'm just going to grab my brush tool, and then I'm just going to paint in her earring just to make this a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to go there, and then just painting with a soft round brush, just going to paint in this earring. And that looks horrible, but all we got to do is change the blend mode. So I'm going to go from normal, probably to darker color, like that, and it looks a little nice on the grungy side. And I'm just going to use my eraser tool just to clean it up a little bit. And I don't like that part. And Then one more thing I want to do is I'm just going to go back up to our grind layer and maybe add a little bit of ripple to that as well. So going to filter, distort, and then to ripple. We'll see if it needs a little. I'm just going to put in 66%, hit OK. And yeah, it just helps a little bit. Now you don't have to do that. It might be a little much, but whatever. It's a good way to learn how to use this, and repetition is key to learning. So hopefully that has helped you out. And now I'm going to see what happens if we add one more little bit of texture above everything. So I'm going to bring in that last piece of texture, holding Option, dragging this, and we're just going to do a little bit of a blend mode on top. So I like lighten, and I'm just going to drop the opacity. And then one other thing we can do is turn this into a group, and then we're going to name this effects. Maybe just crank the contrast. Make it a little bit stronger like that. And we have an awesome design using threshold, a displacement map, the ripple filter, and turning a threshold into a smart object so that it's easy to edit. And the biggest thing is I hope you guys learned a bunch on this, and I hope you use this in your graphic design projects, and I hope you understand that this is the correct way to use a threshold.